Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Elliot, Lawry.
I'm Lucy Tassell.
Starting this month, Australia's music charts will focus on albums and songs released in the last 2 years, transitioning away from older releases that had long been taking up space. It's the biggest change to the ARIA chart since the introduction of streaming figures over a decade ago. When this new system came into effect last week, a viral hit from Aussie artist Keli Holiday jumped to the top spot on the Australian singles chart. On today's podcast, I chat to Holiday, whose real name is Adam Hyde, about how it feels to go to number one with an independent release and what these chart changes mean for the future of the Australian music industry.
Elliot, you've got a really fun chat with Adam Hyde for us today. But before we get into it, I think a question a lot of people will be asking is, why should we care about the music charts?
That is a really good question to start with. I think personally, I've always been really chart obsessed. As a fan of popular music, it's interesting to see how people are listening and what's being reflected in sort of the cultural zeitgeist on the charts. They also give validation to the artist that their work is being received well. Now, of course, there are plenty of artists that haven't seen their work reflected on the charts, but it's more often than not that when a musician is being introduced, it's always as, so-and-so has 5 number one albums or 10 top 30 hits. It kind of becomes the accolades that define their career and their legacy going on. Now, on the other side of things, chart success can also provide massive opportunities for smaller artists and those that are just starting out. So music labels use charts as kind of a gauge to determine which acts they're going to invest more money and time into, meaning bigger budgets for future projects, and also things like festival bookings can come out of chart success as well.
Now, on those charts, you mentioned that Australia's charts, the ARIA charts, have undergone some big changes this month. Can you walk me through what those are?
Yeah, so the last time the ARIAs made a massive change to the way the charts are calculated was back in the 2010s when they introduced streaming figures from platforms like Spotify. This obviously was something that needed to happen. It's where people were consuming music, but an unintended byproduct of that change was that several of the main charts then became clogged up by older hits. So think of things like albums that we're constantly going back to as an Australian audience, and those sort of classic songs that will never go away.
Yeah.
They're constantly being streamed and they're constantly turning up on the charts. Now, at the end of last month, there was only 2 songs inside the top 10 of the Australian singles charts that were actually released this decade. This decade, so in the 2020s.
Yeah.
So, in response, ARIA has now taken almost all songs that were released more than 2 years ago and rehomed them on a different chart. They're called the on-replay charts. What that means is we now have space on those main charts for newer releases, and the idea behind the move was to kind of better reflect contemporary listening habits.
Yeah.
ARIA CEO Annabelle Hurd told us that the changes give a much clearer and more nuanced picture of how Australians are listening.
So we've got Adam Hyde on the pod today to talk us through all of those changes from an artist's perspective. For those listening who might not know much about him, what should they know going into your interview with him?
So if you haven't heard the name Adam Hyde, you might also know him as one half of the band Peking Duck. They've had a lot of chart success over the years, so he's experienced talking about this topic. More recently, he's actually taken on a solo venture under the name Keli Holiday. If you don't know either of those names, Peking Duck or Keli Holiday, you maybe know him as the partner of podcast host and media personality Abby Chatfield. He is now Mr. Abby Chatfield. So Abby is an important part of this story because Adam actually wrote the song that has gone to number one as a love letter to her. And it kind of then grew and took on a life of its own, which is why we're talking about it today. Throughout the interview, you'll also hear him refer to his girlfriend. That is who he is talking about in this context. So, without further ado, let's jump into the chat. Adam, welcome to the Daily Aus.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a beautiful gaff you got me in here.
Thank you. That's very kind of you to say. So look, we're talking today because your song Dancing 2 has just gone to number one on the Australian singles charts. What does it mean in 2025 to have that sort of success?
It's a solid quest, my guy. It's funny because, in this day and age, it's quite hard to know, how to kind of make a song connect in any way. There's no real rhyme or reason anymore. The old guard is kind of out. There's an independent release. There's no label backing. And to see it resonate in this way, but then carry its own kind of steam and become its own thing, and it seems to just keep growing and growing. It's an incredible thing. I don't really have words because, to me, it's kind of beyond the song now. People are soundtracking it for, their babies being born, their marriages, nature videos, people passing away, people beating cancer, all these things. It seems like this all-encompassing scope of humanity soundtracked by this song. And I'm sitting back and watching the ride just going, this is nice to see some wholesome positivity and joy on social media.
Yeah, it's very special. I personally saw it for the first time on TikTok.
Yep.
At what point in the recording process do you start thinking about social media? Like, is it with you in the studio? Is it something that comes after?
I think it should never come into play in the studio. And it's funny because, you know, I've been grateful enough to say that music has been my job, even though I don't feel like I'm a musician. But I've been doing it for like almost 20 years now, professionally. And, you know, there's so many moments in the studio when you're making something and there'll be someone who will be like, oh yeah, like that'll be like a TikTok moment, you know? And it's like, as soon as that's even brought into the space, I feel like you may as well just shoot the song in the head and throw it out the window. Because like this song's a good example of that. This song was a love letter. I wrote this as a love letter to my girlfriend. Then I decided to put those words over a beat that I'd made. And then, you know, kind of finesse the melody and make it work with said words, and then change a little bit here and there and kind of shape it up. And there was never a moment where I was like, this is going to be a song that's released. It's going to be a gift to my girlfriend that I love. You know, which is funny because it's so cliche. It's like it really came from a wholesome, genuine place, I guess. And through that process, I don't think there is any space for thinking about the optics of people on TikTok, nor, you know, the optics of radio people or anything like that do come into one's mind when creating music due to the commerce side of things. But I don't know. I think it connected because it was just a love letter, you know?
It definitely has become a big part of the story of it, though. Like you mentioned earlier, there's all these places that people are using the song to tell their own stories and engage. Is it that you follow the lead of what's happening online, or, you know, the dance comes as part of a marketing thing? Like, where does it come into play?
Solid quest, yet again. I mean, it's interesting because I don't know. I'm new to it all. You know, I'm not like, you know, I wasn't like really lurking TikTok like that. I by no means was really trying to cater anything that I've done to TikTok. And I've noticed in the past that I think once that does start happening, and if you do too many trends, you can just kind of get a bit lost in the sauce, so to speak. But as far as the montages and compilations of like people having these beautiful life moments, I've got nothing to do with that. That's like
organic.
That's organic, and it's also just like I wouldn't know how to orchestrate that if I tried. You know what I mean? What I do know how to orchestrate is me dancing like a dickhead in front of a camera.
Can we get a sample of that?
We can do that, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I can't really do it sitting down, but it's just a hip shimmy.
That was
We can do it after. We'll get the whole office to do it.
Yeah, well, you look good doing it, so
thank you.
It's working.
Thank you.
I want to turn now to the charts. You've had a lot of chart success over the years with Peking Duck. For someone who isn't in the music industry, why should anyone care about charts? And does something like a chart-topping album lead to more opportunities, bigger budgets, festival bookings, things like that?
Solid quest, yet again. I think any artist, whether they like to admit it or not, wants flowers at some point. You know, you put a lot into a song or an album, into your work, and then it's nice to be recognized by the powers that be, so to speak. And I think, you know, there's a lot of people on those boards, whether that's the Grammy committee or the, you know, the ARIA board. These are people that have really like, they've dedicated their lives to the music and the artists that are in the sphere in that time and what's happening within the culture. And it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of just getting that, like, we see her and we recognize that that is of quality and of substance that we want to represent. And it also, you know, it comes down to sales, streams. It's also just a representative figure of the data of saying, hey, well, you're up there because that many people are listening to your shit right now. So that's cool in the sense of like, whoa, what the fuck? That's crazy. But for me personally, it hits on a deeper level just because, like I said, I've never had a number one before. And this is completely independent. There's no label. And it all happened from the people. You know, it wasn't me. You know, like it just started going crazy. Like I thought my phone was fucking glitching when I saw the video start going. And then that kind of spiraled into people really connecting with the song. And that's a beautiful thing. So to see it go number one, I was like, this is insane, you know. But I mean, what it means to chart, I'm not sure because it's my first time. So I still don't really know. maybe in 10 years, if I get another one, then I'll have a better grasp on it, you know.
Yeah, okay, we'll circle back. We'll do another follow-up.
We'll circle
interview.
back. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Well, this month, we've actually seen some major changes to the way that the ARIA charts are calculated. So I'm not sure if you saw it, but starting from this week, the main charts have been limited to just focus on songs from the past 2 years.
Yeah.
That means that legacy acts like Crowded House, who were number one last week, are no longer on the same chart. They've been moved. Why do you think they've made those changes?
Hi, I'm Zara. I'm the co-founder of the Daily Aus, and we started this company because we think news can be done differently. If you agree, you can hit subscribe. It's the best way to help us grow. Now, back to the video.
I can't answer why they've done that because I don't know why, but why I think they should have done it a while ago, and now it's great that they've done it, is because we all romanticize legacy and nostalgia so much so to a fault.
It's very Australian.
It's very Australian, right? And there's nothing wrong with romanticizing the past. We all do it. We're all human. But it really becomes to a fault when we're so caught up on the past that we're not looking at what's happening on our doorstep right now. And there are so many talented Australian artists that will never get that shine because we're so hung up on Crowded House. I mean, first of all, they're Kiwis and they're incredible. And so are AC/DC. They're incredible. You know, these are really, really magical artists that have contributed great art to the world at large. But at the same time, you know, how can we have another AC/DC or Crowded House without actually nourishing what's here right now? So by doing that, I think it's incredible. You know, it's giving new artists a spot and a place. And I think there's a lot more work to be done in that whole space, you know, and I'm by no means the gatekeeper on any of that. But I think it's definitely a large step in the right direction. I think it's great. You know, it shows progress. And even though it might be, you know, a fair bit overdue, that's okay. It's good to see that people are recognizing that. And it's things like that that will really propel new music. You know, those things are the things that really move the needle as far as I'm concerned. So I'm ecstatic for new artists in that sense, for sure.
So that's an overwhelming endorsement of the changes, which is great, because I did actually reach out to ARIA, and the CEO, Annabelle Hurd, told me that Dancing 2 taking the number one spot this week is one of the strongest signs that their new system is working.
I'll take it, dog.
An absolute win. What do you make of that?
That's awesome. First and foremost, that's cool. I didn't know that you spoke to them.
Yes, I did.
I haven't even spoke to them. That's cool. I think, yeah, it is interesting because for me, I'm really ecstatic about it all as far as the charts, back to your question before and now to answer this one. It's like, you know, this was really independent. This was a really independent release. And a lot of people, when they heard the album and this song, said, we can't touch it. We don't know what to do with it. We don't think this is going to work here nor there. And we were like, okay, you know, that's cool, whatever. We're going to put it out anyway. And then to kind of see those same people come around and be like, oh, no, we get it now. It's just interesting that it kind of proves the point that a lot of people won't know what they think is good until it's really there and in front of them. And they really kind of forced to look at it a bit. And I don't blame anyone for that. I think that's human nature or human error, for lack of a better term. But I think, it's kind of historically cool in a way that, like, the first time that they brought in that new rule where they got to get rid of the old stuff and it's got to be new, I got to swing in there with an independent release, no less. Because, you know, if you look at those charts, a lot of them are with major labels. So I'm really proud of that because it shows that, like, grassroots level, I think the people are really dictating what's hot now, more than ever, obviously, with social media. But to see that kind of influence from the people bleed into these larger discussions such as charts and what have you, it's like, it's dope. It's dope. It feels like a bit of a, I don't want to use the word revolution, that's a bit heavy, but feels like a pleasant change, a fresh, like a new season, you know, a new era.
How do you think that turning up on the charts trickles down to your everyday listener like me?
I mean, I don't know. I guess if something is up on the charts, then streaming services and radio, you would hope at least they would then be like, okay, we should probably give this a spin. You know, we should probably give this a bit of shine or a bit of time in the sun, which would then trickle down to the person who, you know, we all use streaming services in this day and age. And I think, you know, I can't answer what a chart position would do in that sense. I just think it's more so representative of where that piece of music is sitting in the zeitgeist of culture. And that's cool. Like, if that's a marker for that, then fuck yeah, so be it. Because there should be little markers, I think, even though it's cool to be airy-fairy about things, I'm a pretty strong supporter of, like, yeah, we should have a bit of a system somewhere, that kind of just is like, let's talk about sales. Because, speaking of AC/DC, they had the second highest selling record of all time with Back in Black.
Yeah, wild.
Which is fucking wild. I only found that out like a year ago. And I'm born and raised Canberra, Australia. It's like, we should be talking about that shit more, which is interesting because we're so in love with legacy. Yet we don't. If I was taught that shit in school, I'd be fucking Angus Young Jr. 10 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, but these are the things that are super important. And like stats like that do make things more believable. You kind of need a number every now and then to be like, oh shit, that's legit. I don't know. We're in a weird time with music in general. It's an exciting time, but a strange time nonetheless, because nobody really knows where to pick it. You can't really, you don't really know everyone's pissing in the wind and in the dark at the same damn time, which is fun.
That's what I think is interesting about this whole discussion, is that bodies like ARIA are grappling with how to measure what is popular right now. Mm-hmm. It used to be a lot easier. What's on the radio, what are people buying physically in stores. So just to your point about people discovering your music through social media, can I ask, how do you personally discover new music?
Word of mouth seems to be the one way. I discovered in many ways, but the one way that I've found I really listen to that piece of music and I go, I'll give it my all, is word of mouth through people that I really fuck with, like people that I love, or, people that I look up to, or people that I know that their taste level is like, their reference points are fucking bang on, because I know they're not going to give me a dud. And if it's something I haven't heard of, I'll run to that piece of music and I'll sit there and absorb it all with my eyes closed. And then I'll be like, yeah, okay. And then I'll fucking hyperfixate on it for a week.
What's going number one on Adam Hyde's phone right now?
Well, it's funny. Right now I'm just listening to Leonard Cohen. Back to back to back. I think I'm pretty convinced Leonard Cohen's the closest thing we have to God.
Big call.
Big call, but a true call in my eyes.
I just wanted to wrap up by talking about the future. The ARIA CEO also told us that it can be difficult for local artists to break through in what she called a competitive global music landscape. So there's probably teenagers listening to the podcast today that might be considering a career in music. Do you have any advice about overcoming barriers such as a competitive global media landscape?
Well, first of all, anyone that is listening, that is creating music, I salute you. You've already done a very heroic act in that itself. The pursuit of creativity is a never-ending one, a torturous one, and a very rewarding one. And it don't get any easier. It's always hard, but it is fun when you have those breakthroughs. And I think it gets harder and harder in the sense that, yes, it feels like if you're in Australia creating music right now, you're up against, the world, literally. But what I will say is never stop because of that. Because at the end of the day, good art will always penetrate and will always get some time in the light. It always will. And I know it feels like you're falling on deaf ears and your music's getting thrown in the dark, or your art or your movies or whatever it is that you're creating. But the actual journey of the creation itself is the pleasant part. That's where you get all the joy and all the beauty out of. Once you've done that, it's out of your control. It really is. You can do a million interviews, you can sign to a big record label, or you can do a stunt where you jump off the Sydney Harbour Bridge naked to promote your music. You can do whatever you want. But at the end of the day, it's really up to the people, or up to the whatever you want to call it, that will really decide what happens from there. So at the end of the day, if you enjoy what you're doing, keep doing it, because you should never be discouraged by algorithms, nor, data or numbers or what people tell you, because, some of the greatest pieces of art have been made by people that were constantly pushed down, but they kept going. And I think perseverance is the most potent antidote to those kind of mentalities. If you just keep going, it'll work itself out. And it is hard. I'm not saying it's a walk in the park by no means, especially people ain't got cash. It costs money. Shit's hard. But what's harder is sitting there wishing that you did that shit. There's always a way. And you find that way, pursue that way, you can get it all day.
Well, that's a beautiful message to end on.
Yeah. It's a poem.
A poem.
It's a poem. Yeah. Yeah.
Adam Hyde, Keli Holiday, thank you for joining the Daily Aus.
Thank you very much, Elliot. It's a pleasure, Tresh.